Journal podcast. I'm your host, Jason Berlindi, the publisher and editor of the Fretboard Journal magazine. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, I'm talking to the one and only Colin Meloy of the Decemberists. Now, I've interviewed Colin before for the magazine, but it's been a while, and it's been a while since the Decemberists have had a new record out. But they have one. It's out now. It's beautiful. It's called As It Ever Was, So It Will Be Again. And I had a blast talking to Colin about the making of it, how often a band that's been together for 20 plus years gets together to rehearse and practice these days, how he writes songs. We talk about his books and so much more. Colin is one of those truly brilliant figures who's carved out an existence that goes beyond music at this point, but everything he does sort of has this amazing historical folk-leaning bent, and it's just always fun to chat with him. And we always geek out on British folk music and filed guitars and all sorts of other stuff, as you will hear. Before I get to my chat with Colin, the big news around here is this is the week when so many of you are going to start opening your mailboxes and seeing the Fretboard Journal's 54th issue. If you have not joined us yet and want in on the fun, go to fretboardjournal.com, click on the subscribe button, and get started with our print magazine. If you've gone to a newsstand lately, you've probably seen there's sort of this resurgence in print and a lot of magazines in other genres for sports, for cooking, for all sorts of stuff. Look a lot like the Fretboard Journal. This is the new model. A magazine that doesn't clobber you over the head with a new ad-filled issue every month, but takes its time and has thoughtful journalism and writing that you will not find online and beautiful photography. It's what the Fretboard Journal's been doing now for 19 years and will continue to do it. The other big news around here is that our Fretboard Summit is just completely off the charts this year. August 23rd to 25th, 2024 at Chicago's Old Town School of Folk Music. We've got Colin Hay. We've got Blake Mills, Joe Henry, Valerie June, Nathan Graham, Adam Levy and Rich Hinman, and countless other incredible artists showcasing their talents and teaching at our little guitar festival. We've also got something like 85 guitar makers, both independent solo luthiers as well as bigger brands. And with one all-access pass, you can see it all the workshops, all the fun stuff, all the parties, all the concerts. We also are going to start selling tickets if you just want to go guitar shopping. That's fine. But August 23rd to 25th are the dates. August 23rd, the night with Blake Mills and Joe Henry in particular, you only can see with the 3-day pass. So we hope you will come. We hope you will be a part of our little guitar gathering. We intentionally cap the tickets at a pretty low number, just a few hundred, because we want everybody to have a great time. So I hope you will be one of those lucky few hundred. Passes are selling pretty fast. So go to fretboardsummit.org to read up on it. We'll start posting scheduling stuff pretty soon. But trust me when I say this is our best and most fun lineup, and you will be blown away. Our sponsors for today's podcast are Peghead Nation, where you can learn to be a better player with some of the coolest instructors around. Go to pegheadnation.com. Use the discount code FRETBOARD. You'll get your first month free. We are also brought to you by Seattle's own Mike and Mike's Guitar Bar. They're just down the street from me and have one of the neatest vibes imaginable out of any vintage instrument store. Multiple floors you can go hang out, a huge repair shop, and most importantly, the most interesting inventory around in terms of a wide array of price points, guitars from Japan, American guitars, acoustics, electrics, synths, all points in between. Check them out and follow them on Instagram. We're also brought to you by Stringjoy Strings, where you can save 10% off of your first order by using the discount code FRETBOARD. They've got mandolin strings now, folks, as well as, of course, a wide array of acoustic and electric guitar strings. And they do custom stuff like nobody else. Check them out at stringjoy.com. Last but not least, I just want to give a shout out to our friends at StewMac. If anybody out there is working on guitars or thinking about working on guitars or worried about humidity for their guitars over summer, StewMac has you covered. Go check out all of their incredible inventory as well as their videos and so much more. They're really crushing it. They're coming to our summit this year in Chicago. You can meet Eric Coleman. You can meet Dan Erlewine, lutherie legend, and StewMac has all sorts of surprises coming too. So check out Stu Mac's offerings. There's a link in the show notes, and come see them in Chicago. All right, those are my big announcements. Again, today's guest is Colin Meloy of the Decemberists. Hopefully everybody listening to this podcast knows all about the Decemberists. It's right up, at least my alley, and their new album is called As It Ever Was, So It Will Be Again. Congrats on the new record.
Thank you.
I think it was a long time ago when I interviewed you for the Fretboard Journal proper. And I think back then we were geeking out collectively on like filed guitars from the UK and maybe the music of Nic Jones. When I hear this new record, As It Ever Was, So It Will Be Again, I hear it's a little jauntier maybe. Is that my mind playing tricks on me?
I'm jauntier than Nic Jones. I mean, I think it owes more to Nic Jones than our last record did, certainly. And Nic Jones is pretty jaunty. I mean, I think he
did that Teddy Bear's jaunty. Picnic song. Yeah, that's true.
7 Yellow Gypsies, things like that.
I guess I just hear a little more pop than. Yeah. And then, of course, the last track, which we could do a whole podcast on, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is what it is. I think it is the collection of songs that it became in so many ways. I think it's a summation of our career to a certain degree. I mean, I feel like I can say that with some confidence. I feel like it touches on a lot of moments throughout, our 22 years. And there's plenty of pop and jauntiness in that 22 years to draw from.
There had been a little break between this record and the last one. Obviously, there's COVID in there. Were you writing songs? I mean, were you thinking like we're done, or where were you at?
I'm always thinking that we're done. I like flirt with abandoning it all at every record. I think going back to the very first one, I'm not somebody who does well with the pressures, I think, of the pressures and the trappings of being like a working musician. It freaks me out. I get a kind of vertigo. So, and I think that bears out plenty of songs in our catalog that are basically like the "fuck this, I quit" songs. That's not an uncommon thing for me to feel. And in some ways, I feel like it's necessary food to fuel me as I go forward.
Do you feel you've created this enormously successful book, the Wildwood book thing? Do you feel that way about writing too, where after you're done with the writing project, it's like never again?
No, I want to write books forever. It's really just the stuff that you have to do to be a professional musician these days. Just the promotion, like touring and promotion and festival stages and festival offers and guarantees and stages and theaters. I don't know. It's the trappings of any kind of success. I've been pretty uncomfortable with from the beginning. So, and I don't know if I could just sit and write songs and put them out into the world, I would be a contented man. But because I'm expected to promote those songs, that's where I get with books. You don't really, for better or worse, you're like, what do I have to do to promote this? And they're like, I don't know, be on a couple podcasts, go sign some books in a bookstore here in town. And that's good. It's much more forgiving for those of us who are maybe a little bit more publicity shy.
Yeah. Well, and you have the pressure of an actual band to support.
Yeah, and there's a whole machine around it. Other
Yeah.
than your own family, there isn't multiple families relying on you.
So do the bandmates know your mindset and think like, yeah, this could be our last record, and
I
they go
think
find their
so.
own projects?
I think so. I assume so. I mean, like I said, they're like I'm pretty explicit about it, I think, in some of the songs. But I mean, I think I also, I mean, as with anything, of course I'm going to continue doing this. And as long as we're able to do it in a way that we can make money, make a living, I will happily, bear whatever, um, bear whatever I have to on my back, or all my struggles, in order to make it a reality. I mean, I think, all of my dalliances with retirement, I think are mostly just, you kind of pick at something, or just sort of flirt with it, and it kind of makes light of it. I think writing songs about my struggles with being a musician are just a way of kind of just getting it out, expressing it in some way, and trying to alleviate some of that burden, that pressure.
I feel like I've talked to a lot of musicians in the last few months who've done things like these song clubs where you get a prompt and then everybody has to write a song in a week. I mean, I think I've even spoken to John Roderick, our mutual friend, about that. Was there a moment in this last 5-6 years where you're, at the very beginning of the As It Ever Was process, where you were like, oh crap, I'm writing an album again, I'm back in it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was, I mean, that's never like oh crap. I mean, part of it is like, oh, here we go, another record cycle is beginning. But I mean, if I've got enough material that feels like it's ready for a record, that's a wonderful feeling. It feels like, I mean, it's an uncommon feeling. Like, it happens only once every few years these days, and it's a great feeling to feel like you have a collection of songs that are worthy and ready to be recorded. And I'm not in such a hurry anymore to get to that point. I feel like, at this point in our career, I'm okay with taking a little bit longer. I mean, I think I don't think that people want to hear a Decemberist record every year. I don't want to hear a Decemberist record every year. I don't want to part of me is like, God, can I just stop? Can we just cap the catalog now? So when we go on tour, it's not such an anguish creating a set list that will hopefully satisfy everyone. But there's little more satisfying in a musician's career, I think, than having like a collection of songs that feel like you're proud enough, that you feel like they're good enough to record and put out in the world.
Mm-hmm. You're in your barn where I see a drum kit and multiple keyboards and a typewriter. Is this where the songs originate from?
This is where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, the typewriter, not so much. I got the typewriter. I had this idea. I feel like when I wrote Wildwood, and I was like, you know what? Because kids would write in letters, and I was like, I feel like I need to respond to these letters. And I got a typewriter because I thought it would be cool if they received a typewritten letter, but it quickly broke, and now it's just sits there. But yeah, this is my workspace. So this is the old machine shop on this 19th century farm that I live on.
You live outside of Portland. I have to imagine if there is anyone within a 50-mile radius who could get their typewriter fixed, it would be you.
Yeah, it probably could. I think I also was like, oh my God, it's a lot of work responding to these letters by a typed, letter. I think I gave it up.
Yeah, I've been in that same exact boat. I thought to to make a point that print isn't dead one year, I would send out my media kit to sell ads for the magazine via typewriter.
Really?
And I made it through around three letters, and they were very truncated letters.
Yeah.
And then it was like, I can't do this. And in the old days, you could hire a secretary or someone of that
To
ilk
hammer it out.
to just type it away. It'd take them 30 seconds probably, but
Yeah.
not me.
Oh yeah. I'm very thankful. I think if that was what I was forced to write on, I would be writing longhand, I think.
Yeah. So when you're writing songs for the Decemberists, is there one guitar you turn to?
Well, no, I think I go back and forth. Well, I have that I think we've talked about my guitars before. I have a 1966 Martin D28 that's sort of like my home workhorse. And that gets a lot written on it. I don't bring it on the road. But I also have this J200, this 1952 J200 that actually got a lot of use in recording. It had strings on it that were like 2 years old. I hadn't touched it in forever, and I brought it into the studio. And the dead strings, I swear to God, dead strings on an old J200, like, sounds so good. It sounded so good. So we recorded a bunch with that guitar. But then I also jump around. I sort of whatever's at hand. I do have that filed Falstaff that is sounding better and better, I feel like, over the years. And because I got it new, and I feel like it's just starting to kind of open up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Is there a moment where you're in writing mode where you're kind of like, is this going to be fiction or prose or my newsletter, or is this going to be a song?
No, songs I think are very distinct from writing prose. My process, I'm not the sort of person who sits down at a computer typewriter, just starts writing. Like, songs really have to grow out of playing around with chords and melodies and things like that. I mean, I know that there are, people that write lyrics first and then fit music to it, but I'm just never been that person who did that.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So were all these songs fleshed out before you go into the studio?
Yeah, I think there was a moment in February of 2023, we went into the studio I thought just to record some of the songs that we had played live, which was Burial Ground, William Fitzwilliam, and Black Mariah, but ended up spending the week just me going through my songwriting journal and just kind of playing whatever little fragments of things that I had on hand. And I think I quickly discovered that is not a way that I prefer to work. I'm not the sort of person who can just bring little bits and pieces. And I know that that's how other people work. Sometimes, people will bring in bits and pieces and then you flesh them out and you finish them in the studio. I can't write in the studio. I can't sit, like, if I have to, I'll try to find some quiet place to finish a verse or rewrite a line or something like that. But I don't know what it is, if it's a habitual thing or my own weird proclivities, but I really do need to write by myself, away from people, in my own space that I know that I'm isolated in. Nobody's listening in on me. Nobody's expecting or waiting for me to finish something, and then I can sort of just work at my own pace in my own time. So when we ended up going back into the studio, and I think we were going to go back in July and sometime midsummer, the songs were finished. Like, I couldn't be bringing in fragments. Like, I need to bring in finished songs.
Got it. And the band is just kind of adding their magic to it.
Yeah, and so typically how we've worked in the past is that I'll have finished songs that I'll demo, and we will get together in the studio they'll have listened, they'll at least have like a passing familiarity with the song from the demo. We'll play it live together, try to work out an arrangement, arrive at the arrangement, keep the drums and bass, and then build from there. This time we kind of inverted it where a lot of the songs, it was just me in the studio, guitar and voice, and that's what we kept, and then we built from there.
Okay. And what happened on Joan in the Garden?
Joan in the Garden was built from voice and guitar. At least the first two parts, that first long section. Are you getting background noise? Or
No,
you're good? Okay.
I'm good.
And somebody out there with like a
Metal
leaf
detector?
blower, some leaf blower. Yeah, so Joan in the Garden was just me and guitar and voice, and then we built it from there. That was really a construction project. But the last part, the kind of riffy part, the sort of Iron Maiden-y part, was kind of more traditional. We knew that we needed to actually play that all together and then flesh it out from there.
And did you know it was going to be a nearly 20-minute long song?
Well, I knew it was going to be a long song because we did have the three parts of what I think of as, and the initial three parts was the opening part and then the kind of the big swelling part that follows that. And that's how it was in the demo, and then it went straight into the riffy part. But I had this feeling that it needed more, it needed something, it needed to be a longer journey. And I'd thought about writing, I had other pieces that we could put in there that were actually written musical pieces. But for whatever reason, it didn't feel right to have a fourth musical piece. It felt like it needed something to explore because so much of the song, this idea of Joan in the Garden, right? Because that's her moment of visitation. That's where she's visited by these angels, by these saints, and her mission is given to her, which is kind of this moment of profound hallucination, right? At least from like modern sensibilities. And so much of Joan in the Garden is modern sensibilities placed on this sort of very critical, iconic story, or the critical part of this iconic story of her visitation, of this annunciation of the saints. And so it occurred to me, how do we express that in the song, that sort of hallucinatory visitation? And so it felt like I came to Tucker with the idea. The band was on board. Funk is always collecting these like weird modular synths, and it was an opportunity for him to kind of go to town. So a lot of that was built. It was a really fun construction project, as you can imagine. And it did exactly what I felt like needed to be there at that point in the song.
Yeah. So you got to live the life of a jam band artist for a song, basically.
Well, I mean, do jam bands, I don't know if they do 5 minutes of noise. I felt like I got to live the life of a noise band.
Yeah.
Like an ambient, and I love a lot of Grouper is one of, I love that band. She's so great. And I think I appreciate a lot of like noise and ambient music.
Yeah.
It was fun to kind of explore that a little bit.
What else? Every time I've talked to you, we talk about British folk, but what else is on heavy rotation at the Meloy household right now?
What is, trying to think. I mean, British folk, people ask me what I'm into. The new Daisy Rickman record, I really like a lot. Do you know who that is? She's a Cornish singer, songwriter. And I feel like ostensibly she's connected to kind of, I think there's a lot of really cool, I feel like there's like a fourth or fifth wave British folk revival happening in England right now. And there's just a lot of really neat stuff happening. I think in some ways, I mean, obviously it has grown out of the folk revivals that have come before it, but I feel like it's distinct in that I think in some ways it's borrowing a lot from the sort of more modern fascination with folk horror that has come out of like in film and responding to that. And I think that combined with discovering, old folk music is kind of an interesting new bent. So Daisy Rickman, I feel like, is a part of that new wave, where it is as much about the sort of folkiness as it is about the sort of psychedelia and about kind of embracing of like pagan sensibilities, like old world, pre-Christian British Isles stuff. She has this kind of great, weird, low voice. And I feel like it kind of dabbles into Velvet Underground territory too, which is cool.
All right.
A Goblin Band is another really great, but they're very trad. But they're kind of like the band that would be in Wicker Man, parading through the streets, like very, very sort of like pagan oriented, young kids playing this very traditional folk music.
Yeah. How do you find out about this kind of music? Are you tapped into, do you go to the UK and like go to these clubs?
No, I mean, I learned about it on the internet, just by, looking around and seeing what other people are listening to and following threads.
Yeah. The filed email newsletter.
Well, yeah, but there's also, there's like I don't know if it used to be called folkradio.uk. And they were a blog, and now they're called something else, but they're constantly putting out these little mixtapes of a lot of kind of contemporary, and some of it's a little too straight for me, like, the new Martin Simpson or something like that. But they put in a lot of super weird stuff as well.
But you don't get burned out.
On British folk music, no, I don't seem to. I keep coming back to the well.
That's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, that's just where I'm at.
All right, yeah. Talk about the Wildwoods becoming a movie.
Yeah. Well, Leica, which is a stop motion animation studio in Hillsborough near Portland, optioned it in 2010 before it was even out. While I was still writing, I'd written about half of it, and we had sold the books on that half of a manuscript. And then almost immediately after we had sold it, these different movie studios came sniffing around. And it was a really weird time. And as you can imagine, and I remember Carson and I being like, this book isn't even finished. We're going to say no to anybody who wants to make a movie adaptation of it, unless they do it in the exact style of Watership Down from whatever 1978. Oh, I did a thumbs up. Or if it's stop motion animation. And it happened that Leica contacted our agent like a couple days later. And so, and they were in Portland, and we liked Coraline, and it felt like the right place to do it. And they were excited enough about it that it felt like the right home for it.
Now, did you give yourself enough time before you locked in with them to hear all the crazy Hollywood suggestions of what they wanted to do with your book?
No. We didn't entertain anybody else. We basically had our agent say no to everyone. I imagine it would have been, if it was even made, it would have been some, CGI spectacular that would have been there and gone in one summer. And I mean, it's only now in development, which is kind of crazy. It's taking we only heard that they actually put it into production. I feel like in 2022.
Okay.
So, and it's probably not going to be out till 2026. So even just the making of it is taking 4 years, not to mention the decade prior to that of just them sitting on it.
And, I saw a lineup of voices that are going to be on there. Do you have any input on anything at this point, or it's like
no, it's out of our hands?
Yeah.
We were invited to be involved early on. I saw a couple drafts of the screenplay and gave my notes on them. I think that Carson was never like, you have to recreate my art, for this film. I think they've always been given a certain amount of license. And at this point, I think we're happy to be, removed from it. We feel like it's in good hands. We feel like they care enough about the story. The people who work at Leica are like genius craftspeople. It's in the best hands we can possibly hope for. So happy to kind of give them that license.
Were you surprised by how well Wildwood did?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of shocking. It was it was kind of a wild time. And the fact that it continues to be this thing that, that people come up to me and they are adults now and they read it as kids, or or kids now who are being introduced to it, sometimes by their parents, I suppose. I don't think we're quite there yet. They came out in 2011. I don't know that the kids reading it they're probably starting to, which will be really crazy when that happens.
I've had many in the last few months. I've had many Fretboard Journal fans and a couple of our contributors admit that it was like, oh, my dad had a subscription and I would see it on our coffee table. And then I grew up and moved out and now I'm subscribing or writing for you. And that is a weird feeling.
It is weird. And it happens a lot with the Decemberists, band that's been around for 22 years. A lot of people who listened as children and now have children, which is pretty wild.
Yeah. So do you have another giant book project in the works or not yet?
Yeah, I'm actually working on my first book for grownups, for adults. And that I'm about maybe 2/3 of the way through it. As soon as all this madness finishes with the record coming out and the second leg of the tour, I'll be able to get back to work on that.
Fiction, or do you not want to talk about it?
It's fiction.
Okay.
I can give you broad strokes. It's about like a near future post Cascadian secession Pacific Northwest.
I love it.
It's about a guy who buys and sells basically discarded afterbirth. You know what a call is? CAUL.
Yeah.
And I learned about this first from David Copperfield, the Dickens novel. David Copperfield is born in a call, and the first thing they do is try to sell the call, and it is bought by a bill broker, which I thought was fascinating. There was a market for these things because they were talismans at the time to ward off drowning. And so I'd always been in the back of my head, that would be an interesting job, somebody who is it kind of a broker for those kind of things. So that's the story.
It's amazing. Do you get to drive around the Pacific Northwest, for research and scout locations, or it's not that accurate?
I think the Pacific Northwest is is in my I've been around it enough that I think I can write pretty freely about it.
Well, I look forward to reading that book.
Yeah. Well, probably not till 2025, 2026.
You've got some stuff going on.
Yeah.
Are you guys touring for this record?
Yeah, we just came off a 4-week tour that just finished like 3-4 days ago. And then we go back out in July and August.
Any new, is the gear changing at all from previous Decemberists shows, or you kind of just staying tried and true?
No, we've brought out a horn player because there's a lot of horns on the record. So we have Victor Nash, who is a Portlander, playing trumpet, flugelhorn, and French horn. And then occasionally Chris Funk is joining that horn section playing baritone sax. Yeah. And then we have Lizzie Ellison, who joined us on our 2022 tour, and she's doing backing vocals and some guitar and keyboard stuff. But otherwise, the gear is the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You found a way to make the band less profitable by adding people to the stage.
I know.
You're going backwards.
I know. There was always an effort to let's make this lean and mean this time, but there's no making the Decemberists lean and mean. We are anything but.
I love it. Any other projects we should know about? Anything else brewing?
I think that's it that I really can talk about now, I think. Yeah.
All right. Well, I love it. Colin, the record is great. Thanks for chatting with me. And now I'm going to go check out Daisy
Rickman.
Daisy Rickman.
Yeah. Check it out.
Okay.
All right. That was my chat with Colin Meloy. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to actually put out 2 interviews this week as opposed to just 1 because we have a ton of great conversations to share. Tell your friends, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and thanks as always for tuning in.